Well, the book began rather simply, and it began with an image of a brother who's 10 years old and his little sister who's 3. They're growing up in an impoverished little village in a remote part of Afghanistan. And when we first meet them in the 1950s, they're crossing a desert with their father and they're headed for Kabul. And they don't know what's waiting for them in Kabul. But in fact, what happens in Kabul ruptures the bond between the brother and the sister who love each other dearly. It separates them. And this one act of separation then becomes the trunk of the novel, which is shaped like a tree. A number of plot lines then emerge from this central one, and we meet a rather large cast of characters as the novel progresses who are connected to and affected by this one central event. So the novel becomes more sweeping and kind of more global as it progresses. And at the end of it, the intention is for it to be a kind of a mosaic in that the reader, once is done with the book, has heard individual voices, the cumulative effect being it's kind of like listening to a choir by listening to each separate voice, and you hear one big collective song. Well, the title is inspired by a poem written by William Blake called A Nurse's Song, which had a line in it that said, "All the hills echoed," which I found extremely lovely and evocative. But I wrote mountains instead because of, obviously, in Afghan topography is full of mountains. And I also love the idea of echo because this novel really is shaped like that in the sense that there is an event that happens early in the book which then echoes across time, across generations, across continents, and has far-reaching ripples and ends up affecting the lives of a number of characters, some of whom aren't even born yet. So I thought that the idea of echo was very germane to some of the themes that I was dealing with in this book. Well, it really wasn't my intention because I never know where my books are going. It's kind of like life. It never goes where you think it's going to go. And so when I write my books, I begin with an idea, often a very small one, and it just kind of snowballs. I don't outline my books. I never know what my characters are going to do. I certainly have no idea how my books are going to end. And so it really wasn't until I was about halfway, 2/3 of the way through the book that I began to see that it was really snowballing and becoming kind of like this big, kind of sweeping, epic-like story. And so novels, at least for me, end up deciding their own fate, really, rather than me just kind of pulling the strings. No, the book opens with a fable, which is told by a father to his children, and it's a sort of an old-fashioned folklore kind of tale that I know that was my own creation. But when I was a boy growing up in Kabul, my grandmother, for instance, would tell us stories just like that that would involve these creatures, these demonic creatures like divs and fairies and jinns and things like that. So I began the book with a fable, partly because uh, it, it, in an allegorical way, that fable sets up many of the themes that are then revisited in the novel again and again, albeit in a real life, realistic kind of way. And I thought the fable would be like a foreshadowing of what's to come in the novel. Well, again, it's not that without giving too much away, that I intended to do that. It's really that the characters kind of announce themselves that way. And I'm also very interested in uh, sort of unusual manifestations of love. I've, there's been romantic, quote, like male, female, boy meets girl, falls in love kind of things in my books, but I'm very interested in these intense, um, powerful, enduring relationships between unlikely partners, often who find themselves under conditions of duress. So very little in my book is planned. Much in my books is a process of discovery and kind of spontaneous revelation, in the course of writing to myself.